What's going on, everybody? We've got a two-game card today, and both matchups give us some interesting angles if you know where to look. This is the kind of slate where you have to separate reputation from reality and focus on what teams are actually bringing into the game right now. One side has injuries creating major questions, another side is trying to survive without key backcourt pieces, and the market is giving us a couple of numbers that deserve a serious look. So let's break it down the right way. Game 1, Dallas Wings vs Toronto Tempo. The first game is the one I'm leaning into at home, but I'll be honest, I do not love laying points with the Wings in their current form. They just came out of a game where they nearly lost outright to the Connecticut Sun, and that tells you enough about where this team is right now. A 3-point win sounds fine on paper, but if you watch the game, it was not a clean or comfortable performance. That was more about the Sun not finishing the job than Dallas really stamping their authority on the matchup. That is why Toronto plus 4.5 makes sense to me. This is one of those spots where the underdog is not being asked to do anything outrageous. They just need to stay competitive and keep the game within range. And with the way the Wings have looked lately, that is a very realistic path. Toronto also has a very clear problem to work around right now, but it is not enough to scare me off them. They are still without key backcourt pieces, which means their guard rotation is not at full strength, and that obviously changes the way they have to manage the game. Even so, this team has still been competitive enough to keep the number within reach, and that matters more than style points in a betting spot like this. The bigger concern for Dallas is consistency. One of the main issues is that the offense can go through these wild stretches where efficiency just disappears. When a team is living on streaky scoring and unstable shooting, it becomes harder to trust them to separate by margin, especially when they are not exactly steamrolling opponents. That is a problem if you're asking them to cover points. Toronto's profile also makes this feel like a game where the total can get pushed upward. Their games have tended to line up better with the over because they can get dragged into a faster pace, and if the matchup becomes more possessions-based, that only helps the scoring environment. Even if Toronto is short-handed in spots, they still have the ability to keep the game lively enough to create a decent scoring rhythm. The front-court battle is also part of why I do not hate Toronto here. The size matchup gives them a real chance to hold their own, and that is important because if they can keep things manageable inside, then the Wings are forced into a more difficult type of game. That often leads to tighter margins and more variance, which is exactly what you want if you're taking points with the underdog. So my best pick on the board is Toronto plus 4.5. I do not need them to win outright. I just need them to stay in the fight and keep the margin inside the number. Game 2 is Las Vegas Aces vs Indiana Fever. The second game is the one I'm taking more reluctantly, but the logic still makes sense. The Fever are in a spot where I think they can be competitive, and the biggest reason is the status of the Aces. Without their top-level interior force available, the whole shape of this team changes. That kind of absence is not small. It affects how the team scores, how it controls the paint, and how much pressure it can place on the other side of the floor. That is why I'm leaning Indiana plus 3.5. Even without their own star backcourt piece available, the Fever are still the side I would rather trust in this particular setup. That may sound strange to some people, but when you compare the current conditions, Indiana's spot is cleaner than Vegas's. The Aces also have a fatigue concern that cannot be ignored. They are in the middle of a brutal stretch, with multiple games packed tightly together and travel mixed in. That kind of schedule starts to show up in second-half energy, defensive attention, and overall sharpness. When a team is already missing an important piece and then gets hit with fatigue on top of it, the margin for error gets a lot smaller. Indiana, meanwhile, just came off a convincing home win, and that gives them a little more momentum heading into this one. Even if that previous result does not tell the entire story, it still matters that they are coming in off a solid performance while the other side is dealing with a heavier load and more uncertainty. That is exactly the type of situation where the underdog can stay within the number. The matchup down low also points toward a competitive game. Indiana has the kind of front-court presence that can make things awkward for Vegas, especially if the Aces have to adjust their usual structure. If the interior battle turns into a physical grind, that tends to reduce separation and keep the game close longer than the market expects. That is why I also like the over in this game. Both sides have enough offensive capability to contribute, and once you factor in the way the Fever can attack inside and the way the Aces can still score even in a less-than-perfect setup, the scoring number looks more reachable than the spread market might suggest. So what I like here is Indiana plus 3.5, but my best pick is the over the total. When you step back and look at both games together, the same theme keeps showing up. The market may be leaning on reputation, but the actual conditions are carrying a lot more weight here. In the first game, Dallas is being asked to not only win, but do it with enough consistency to justify laying points, and that is not something I'm fully comfortable trusting based on what we've seen right now. They are in a spot where the margin for error is smaller than it looks, and that makes the points line much more attractive on the other side. In the second game, the Aces are walking in with some real concerns. Between availability questions and the grind of a packed schedule, this is not the same kind of clean setup they normally bring to the table. That opens the door for Indiana to stay involved deeper into the game, because the matchup is no longer just about talent, it is about who is more stable in the moment. That is usually where the best betting value lives, not with the team that has the louder name, but with the team that has the clearer path. Toronto has the points in a game where the favorite has not been convincing enough to inspire full confidence. Indiana has the points in a matchup where the more established side is dealing with complications that could show up over the course of the game. That is the kind of board you want to attack, because it gives you value on both dogs without needing them to be perfect. The biggest theme today is that both underdogs have a real path to cashing because the favorites are coming in with issues that matter. Dallas has not been sharp enough to inspire full confidence, and that makes it hard to trust them to separate the way the market would like. When a favorite is not playing with enough consistency, the underdog suddenly has a much cleaner route to staying inside the number and turning the game into a real fight. Vegas is in a similar kind of spot, but for different reasons. The combination of absence and fatigue is a big deal, especially when a team is already being asked to handle a competitive matchup at a high level. That kind of setup can affect rhythm, late-game sharpness, and overall control, which is why Indiana becomes more attractive in that spot. In betting terms, that combination often creates value on the side that is being overlooked. You do not always need the underdog to be better overall, you just need them to be in the better position on the day. That is what makes both dogs live here, and it also keeps the game totals more active than expected because the favorites are not in a strong enough position to fully dictate how the night goes. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with somebody who's betting these games tonight. It really helps the channel grow, and it makes a huge difference in helping me keep these daily picks and breakdowns coming for you. I appreciate every bit of support, and it means a lot to keep building this with you all. I'll be back with more picks, more breakdowns, and more value in the next one, so make sure you stay tuned. Catch you in the next video.